Everything you've been taught about spiritual ascension is incomplete. Not wrong, just hollow, stripped down, sanitized for comfort. Because if you really knew what the Merkaba is, if you truly understood its power, you wouldn't just meditate, you'd awaken. You wouldn't seek enlightenment, you'd become it. The Merkaba is not a symbol, not an idea, and definitely not some abstract esoteric fantasy. It's a technology, a geometry, a divine vehicle encoded into your very being, hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. They turned it into a myth for a reason, because if you remembered how to use it, you wouldn't be controllable. You wouldn't need them. And that's the part they fear the most. Not your ignorance, but your awakening. So why is it that something referenced in ancient Egypt, Jewish mysticism, sacred geometry, and cosmic consciousness is rarely ever spoken about in the mainstream spiritual world? Because the truth of the Merkaba isn't just powerful, it's dangerous to those who benefit from your spiritual disconnection. From the moment you entered this world, your understanding of reality was filtered through limitation. You were taught to look outward, at objects, at people, at gods in the sky. No one told you to look inward. No one told you that within your very being existed a structure, a pattern, a force field of consciousness capable of transcending space, time, and even death. That force is the Merkaba. But instead of learning how to activate this light body vehicle, you were handed textbooks. Instead of sacred breathwork, you were taught to recite facts. Instead of energy, you were taught matter. Instead of resonance, obedience. And so the Merkaba was buried, not beneath the ground, but beneath layers of distraction, misinformation, and a culture engineered to disconnect you from yourself. Because the Merkaba isn't something you earn. It isn't a reward for being spiritual enough, disciplined enough, or morally pure. It's your birthright. A divine tool embedded into your energetic field, waiting to be remembered. But the system you were born into had no interest in you remembering that. In fact, it worked overtime to make sure you forgot. Every screen you stared into, every celebrity you were taught to admire, every surface-level meditation trend you followed, it was all part of a spiritual bait and switch. Keep you calm, but not conscious. Keep you searching, but never finding. Spirituality became an industry, a product, a performance. And in that performance, real transformation got replaced by aesthetic. Depth gave way to dopamine. What should have been your most powerful inner technology was turned into a vague symbol on a tapestry, a logo on a yoga mat. They reduced the Merkaba to merch. But here's the part they don't want you to realize. The Merkaba isn't gone. It's just dormant. And the only thing standing between you and its reactivation is the story you've been told about who you are and what's possible. The Merkaba isn't conceptual, it's functional. It's a geometry of consciousness, a living star tetrahedron that exists within your energy field, spinning in opposite directions, creating a dynamic light body capable of transporting your awareness beyond this plane. This isn't a metaphor. This is physics, ancient, sacred, and deliberately erased from your everyday reality. Now ask yourself this: why would such a precise, universally recurring shape be present in Egyptian temple walls, in Kabbalistic mysticism, in Eastern meditative traditions, and in modern energy healing, yet never mentioned in your school books or even most spiritual communities? Because the Merkaba unifies things they've worked hard to keep separated: science and spirit, body and light, geometry and divinity. It bridges the left and right brain, the seen and unseen. And once you activate it, you're no longer bound by their rules, because you no longer need their systems. Most people aren't ready for this kind of knowledge, and even fewer are ready to apply it. That's why some things can't be said openly here. If you're serious about remembering what's been hidden, join our free newsletter, Insights Academy, via the link in the description. You'll also receive a limited-time copy of the Kybalion, a key hermetic text they don't want you reading. Because here's the truth. The Merkaba is not for the masses, it's for the initiated. Not because it's elitist, but because it demands readiness. You cannot activate the Merkaba and continue living in autopilot. You cannot step into your light body while still addicted to darkness. It's not just about meditating. It's about realigning your entire energetic system, your thoughts, your habits, your resonance, to match the frequency of divine movement. Because that's what the Merkaba is, movement. Light in motion, a star in flight. The chariot of the soul, capable of shifting your awareness through dimensions the way breath moves through lungs. It doesn't require belief, it requires presence. And the further you drift from your own presence, the harder it becomes to access. That's why the modern world keeps you busy, distracted, and reactive. Every time you reach for your phone instead of your breath, the Merkaba slows. Every time you engage with chaos instead of stillness, it dulls. You weren't meant to live this way. You were built for something much more expansive, an existence where consciousness moves freely, where energy obeys intention, where time bends to awareness. That's the promise of the Merkaba. Not enlightenment as a destination, but expansion as a state of being. And it starts not with answers, but with questions. Not with gurus, but with remembering. You were never meant to fit in. The entire architecture of your being, your energy, your frequency, your consciousness, was designed to evolve, expand, and transcend. But from the moment you began to question the world around you, that natural desire to grow was met with resistance, not just socially, but spiritually. You may have felt it in subtle ways, being dismissed for asking deeper questions, being told to stay grounded when your mind reached for the stars, or being warned not to delve too far into the so-called occult. That word alone, occult, was weaponized. It simply means hidden, and the Merkaba. It was hidden for a reason. Because when spiritual awakening became popularized, when consciousness became commodified, the most powerful truths were quietly left out. You were given meditation apps, but not the sacred geometry behind them. You were told to raise your vibration, but never shown the mechanics of how your light body actually functions. The Merkaba was deemed too powerful, too complex, too uncontrollable for mass consumption. And so, mainstream spirituality became a form of containment, polished, safe, and toothless. It offered peace without power, insight without ignition. You were told to become still, but never told how to move. But the ancient traditions didn't teach stillness as the endpoint. They taught movement, sacred, intentional, dimensional movement. The Merkaba is not a state of peace. It's a vehicle of transformation. And once you understand that, you begin to see just how diluted modern spirituality has become. You begin to recognize the programming inside spiritual circles that subtly trains you to seek comfort, not truth. That rewards politeness over power, that packages awakening in soft colors, staged rituals, and language that soothes the ego but never cracks the code of the soul. And yet, the Merkaba persists. It shows up in dreams, in sacred art, in synchronicities you can't explain, in the strange inner knowing that there's more than you've been told. Because your body remembers what your mind forgot. Your field knows. Your cells carry the blueprint. The twin tetrahedrons, spinning in counter directions, are not just symbolic. They are energetic structures woven into your aura. Left spin, right spin, masculine and feminine, electric and magnetic, heaven and earth. When activated, they form a dynamic energy field that shields, propels, and elevates you. You become both protected and limitless, anchored and expansive. This is why certain teachings deliberately separate the mind from the body, the spirit from the science, and the masculine from the feminine. Because when you unify those polarities, when you become whole, you remember, and when you remember, you activate. That's what the Merkaba requires of you, inner unity. You can't spin both fields in coherence while you're fractured inside. This is the deeper meaning behind all true spiritual practices. They're not about belief, they're about alignment. And alignment isn't manufactured through curated Instagram posts or feel-good quotes. It's forged in the friction of transformation, in the moment you stop seeking validation and start embodying truth. It happens when you step out of the safety of vague spirituality and into the mechanics of ascension. It's not abstract, it's technical. The Merkaba demands discipline, not in the way of restriction, but in the way of precision. Sacred breath, visualization, intention, all calibrated to shift your energetic field into motion. But modern systems, religious, educational, even spiritual, aren't designed to teach precision. They're designed to keep you general, passive, unthreatening. That's why everything powerful has been labeled either dangerous or delusional. That's why people will roll their eyes at words like light body or interdimensional travel, because the deeper the truth, the more aggressively it must be mocked to remain hidden. That ridicule is strategic. Because the Merkaba doesn't just unlock travel, it unlocks memory of who and what you are, beyond the veil, beyond the roles, beyond the scripts you've been given. This is why awakening isn't comfortable, because it asks you to dismantle not just your social conditioning, but your spiritual limitations. You're not just unplugging from media and belief systems, you're unplugging from an identity that was never yours to begin with. And once you do, once you start activating the Merkaba field within you, everything begins to shift. Your perceptions, your dreams, your body itself starts to respond differently to reality. The veil lifts, not all at once, but in pulses, revealing layer by layer that you were never just a body, never just a mind. You were always something more. And the Merkaba isn't the destination, it's the key to the map you've carried within you this entire time. They hid the truth in plain sight. Not underground, not in vaults or classified archives, but right in front of you, disguised as myth, reduced to metaphor. The Merkaba appears across cultures, eras, and continents, etched into ancient temples, woven into mystic texts, encoded in sacred art. Yet despite its global presence, most people have never heard of it. That's not a coincidence. That's a design. The deeper a truth runs, the more it must be obscured to keep people from accessing it. Because if humanity collectively remembered what the Merkaba truly is, a multidimensional vehicle of light, a bridge between this world and higher planes, the structures that profit from your limitation would collapse overnight. In ancient Egypt, it was known as the Merkaba, Mer meaning light, Ka meaning spirit, and Ba meaning body. Light, spirit, body, a unified system of movement. It wasn't just a theory, it was a technology, taught to initiates, encoded in pyramids and sacred ritual. The pharaohs didn't just rule, they traveled, not by chariot, but by light. They understood that the body wasn't a cage, but a conduit, that the soul wasn't stuck, but waiting to move. And this movement wasn't imagined, it was structured. A geometrical, energetic process, designed to elevate the soul beyond this dimension. Thousands of years later, the Merkaba re-emerged in the mystical branches of Judaism, the Kabbalah. In the tradition of Merkaba mysticism, practitioners meditated on divine chariots, ascending through levels of heaven via ritual and inner purity. Again, the symbol wasn't just aesthetic, it was instructional. A star-shaped vehicle, a throne of God, a gateway to higher realms. But as time went on, this knowledge was sealed, passed only through coded language or hidden writings, buried under centuries of spiritual dilution and theological control. You see this pattern again in Tibetan Buddhism, Hinduism, even within Sufi mysticism and early Gnostic texts. Different names, different symbols, same core geometry. Why? Because truth is not owned by a culture. It emerges through consciousness itself. The Merkaba is not religious. It's cosmic. It's not cultural. It's structural. An energetic architecture that every awakened soul eventually remembers. Not through external study alone, but through direct experience. The spinning fields, the vibration of the breath, the electric charge during deep meditation. Those aren't side effects. They're signals, glitches in the veil, indications that you are brushing against the edges of something ancient and encoded in your being. But ask yourself this: why isn't this taught in schools? Why don't spiritual leaders talk about it? Why isn't it front and center in religious or scientific institutions? Because it unifies what they've spent centuries keeping apart. The Merkaba doesn't require belief in a deity, nor does it require a lab coat. It exists at the intersection of the mystical and the measurable. Sacred geometry is not just visual, it's vibrational. Each angle, each spin, each ratio corresponds with frequencies that shift consciousness. That means awakening is not random, it's repeatable. The Merkaba is not a symbol of awakening, it's a system for it. But systems are dangerous to systems. When one system teaches you how to escape another, the dominant one goes to war with it. That's why esoteric teachings were driven underground. That's why ancient spiritual technologies were branded as woo-woo, occult, or pseudoscience. Because truth in its raw form doesn't make people easier to govern, it makes them sovereign. And sovereignty doesn't generate profit. Controlled spirituality, however, is a goldmine. Turn deep wisdom into digestible slogans, monetize inner peace, and sell the illusion of awakening while keeping the mechanics hidden. That's what happened to the Merkaba, and most people never notice. But you did, or at least something in you is starting to. A part of you that knows symbols carry codes. That sacred patterns aren't just beautiful, they're instructional. That truth repeats itself across cultures for a reason. The Merkaba isn't folklore. It's a forgotten instruction manual for your light body. And every time you see it, on a pendant, a mosaic, a tattoo, you're not just looking at art. You're being reminded. The question is, will you remember? There's a reason geometry was once considered sacred. Long before it was reduced to schoolroom equations and dry diagrams, it was the language of the divine, the blueprint behind all creation. Every structure in nature, every crystal, every cell, every galaxy follows patterns, spirals, ratios, interlocking, forms that aren't just mathematical, they're energetic. The Merkaba is one of those forms. Two tetrahedrons, one pointing up, the other down, interlocked and spinning in opposite directions. At first glance, it's simple. But when activated, it becomes a dynamic field of energy. A star, a chariot, a vortex, a vehicle. And it's not just around you, it's inside you. Woven into your electromagnetic field, pulsing with potential, waiting for alignment. But in a world built on distraction, most people never even notice it. You've been trained to look at straight lines, man-made shapes, square walls, rectangular screens. Your eyes and your brain have been conditioned to recognize artificial symmetry, not sacred symmetry. You weren't taught about the golden ratio, the flower of life, the Fibonacci sequence, or the energetic implications of platonic solids. You weren't shown how geometry translates into frequency and how frequency shapes reality. Because if you understood that, you'd realize something dangerous, that your consciousness isn't a passenger in this life. It's the architect, and the Merkaba is one of the tools it uses to build across dimensions. This is where science and spirit collide, and why so many traditions kept this knowledge hidden in symbols and initiation. Because to access the Merkaba is to understand the mechanics of ascension, not in a poetic, metaphorical way, but in literal, structural terms. Spin the fields correctly, breathe in alignment with the central column of energy, hold coherent intention, and you create lift. Not metaphorical lift. Energetic, dimensional. The same way a jet engine creates lift through thrust and velocity, the Merkaba creates movement through spin and balance. It doesn't just shield you, it moves you. Through realms, through timelines, through perception itself. This is what mystics described in ancient texts but could never explain fully, because language falls short of the experience. When you're inside a fully activated Merkaba, space feels pliable, thoughts feel magnetic, time bends. You're not going somewhere, You're expanding your field to encompass more of what already is. You're not traveling through space like a spaceship. You're shifting frequency, tuning into a higher station of reality. And you were born with this capability. Not as a bonus, not as a reward, but as a core function of your being. The fact that it's been suppressed, mocked, or ignored doesn't change its presence. It only changes your access to it. So how do you access it? Not through consumption, not through gathering more spiritual trivia or chasing the next trend. You access the Merkaba through practice, discipline, and internal alignment. Breathwork that harmonizes the flow of prana through your central channel. Visualization that trains the mind to hold the geometric spin. Intention that anchors the heart into coherence. And presence, because without presence, the vehicle doesn't respond. You are the pilot. You are the engine. You are the frequency generator. But none of that matters if you're out of alignment. And that's exactly what the world around you is built to do. Keep you out of alignment. Processed food dulls your frequency. Violent media disrupts your energy field. Addictive algorithms scatter your focus. Constant anxiety collapses your heart space. Every one of these things pulls you further from the state required to activate your Merkaba. Not because the world is evil, but because systems thrive when you're asleep. And awakening doesn't serve the system, it rewrites it. You weren't meant to spin in chaos. You were meant to spin in symmetry. The Merkaba is not chaos, it is coherence. It is the return to divine order. And once that order reactivates in you, everything around you begins to shift. Your body starts to heal. Your perception sharpens. Synchronicities increase. Your life starts unfolding in ways that defy logic, because you're no longer operating on logic alone. You're operating on resonance. And that's the secret. Resonance is reality. You don't get what you want, you get what you are. And when you become coherent, when your energy aligns with sacred geometry, when you spin your inner vehicle into motion, you become a bridge between dimensions, between realms, between who you were told to be and who you truly are. Most people don't even realize they're carrying blocks. Not physical blocks, but energetic ones. Subtle distortions in the field that dull intuition, fragment focus, and suppress the activation of deeper faculties. You can feel them even if you can't name them. That heaviness in your chest for no reason. The racing thoughts that never seem to pause. The quiet sense that something inside you has been switched off. These are not just emotional byproducts of stress or trauma. They're symptoms of spiritual fragmentation. Evidence that the flow between your body, mind, and energetic field has been interrupted. And if your Merkaba is a vehicle, then these blocks are like slashed tires. You might still exist, but you're not going anywhere. This fragmentation doesn't come from nowhere. It's been engineered into nearly every aspect of modern life. The moment you began to internalize shame for feeling too much, speaking too loud, questioning too deeply, you were taught to suppress your natural energy. The system never wanted you to feel fully. It wanted you manageable, predictable, grounded, but not expansive. And over time, that suppression compounded. Unprocessed emotions, unresolved pain, societal expectations, family conditioning. They didn't just affect your psychology. They coded themselves into your energetic field, layering static over the signal of your higher self. That's what most people mistake for a lack of motivation or low energy. It's not laziness. It's a misaligned field, bogged down by years of conditioning that trained you to disconnect from your light body. But here's where it gets deeper. These blocks don't just stop you from ascending, they magnetize lower frequencies toward you. When your Merkaba is inactive or incoherent, your entire field is susceptible. You become more reactive, more easily influenced, more vulnerable to collective programming and emotional manipulation. That's why you can feel drained after scrolling social media. Why arguments leave you buzzing with negative energy for hours. Why certain spaces feel heavy or certain people seem to bring chaos with them. It's not in your head, it's in your field. Your body is an antenna, and your Merkaba, when active, acts like a tuning device, filtering distortion, amplifying clarity, and shielding you from frequency hijacking. And that's the real tragedy of an unawakened Merkaba. Not just that you're disconnected, that you start mistaking that disconnection for your identity. You say things like, "I've always been anxious," or "I'm just not very intuitive," or "I can't focus," without ever realizing these are symptoms of a scrambled energetic system, not fixed truths. You've been told to pathologize your sensitivity instead of recognizing it as a spiritual indicator. You've been medicated for what might have been misfiring intuition, shamed for what could have been early signs of awakening. And in doing so, the system didn't just block your Merkaba, it made you fear your own power. But power doesn't disappear, it just goes dormant. And the moment you start reclaiming it, you'll notice something strange. The world around you begins to resist, not out of malice but momentum. Your old life was built around a misaligned field. Friendships, habits, environments, they were all tuned to your previous frequency. The moment that starts to shift, the system around you starts to glitch. People pull away. Emotions intensify. Synchronicities accelerate. This is the turbulence of ascension. It's not a breakdown, it's recalibration. Your Merkaba doesn't just lift you, it dislodges everything you no longer align with. And that can feel like chaos, even though it's the beginning of coherence. So if you feel blocked, stuck, or uncertain, it doesn't mean you've failed. It means your system is waking up. Your body is remembering. Your energy is pushing against walls you didn't know existed. That pressure you feel, it's the threshold, the moment just before motion, the stillness before the spin begins. And you don't have to force it, you just have to stop resisting it. The Merkaba was never waiting for you to be perfect. It was waiting for you to be present. Awakening isn't a one-time event. It's a dismantling, a peeling back of layers you didn't know were there, revealing not just a new perspective, but a new operating system entirely. And at the heart of that awakening lies the Merkaba, not as a symbol you observe from the outside, but as a living mechanism within your own field that responds when you begin to truly remember. It doesn't switch on because you read the right books or performed the right rituals. It activates when you drop beneath the noise, beneath the identity, and connect to the still intelligence humming just beneath your skin. But here's the challenge. Awakening the Merkaba isn't like flipping a light switch. It's more like tuning a delicate instrument. And most people try to do it while their lives are full of distortion. They try to access sacred geometry while marinating in stress. They try to touch higher planes while living from a mind constantly pulled into comparison, shame, judgment, and doubt. The Merkaba doesn't respond to that noise. It responds to coherence, not perfection, but presence, not silence, but stillness. There's a difference. Silence can be empty. Stillness is full. And stillness is where the Merkaba begins to spin. When you enter that stillness through breath, through intention, through focused awareness, something subtle shifts. You stop existing inside the mind and start witnessing it. You begin to feel your body not just as flesh, but as frequency. Your thoughts slow, your field softens, and then, like a pulse from deep within, you sense it, the first movement, the first light, the first inner confirmation that something ancient and intelligent is responding. And once it does, your perception begins to stretch. You no longer see from the surface, you see through it. Time starts to behave differently. Reality becomes more symbolic, less literal. Dreams become instructional, not escapist. People in your life start playing more obvious roles. Mirrors, teachers, gatekeepers. Patterns reveal themselves. And what once looked random begins to look designed. This is not imagination. It's frequency recognition. You're starting to read the grid. The Merkaba, in motion, acts like a tuner, aligning your consciousness to higher informational fields. It's like finally having the right key for a lock you didn't know existed, but you have to be brave enough to use it. Because once you start tuning into this new level, you'll also start seeing everything that isn't in resonance with it. The distractions, the lies, the habits that numb instead of awaken, the relationships that keep you small, the environments that shrink your frequency to maintain comfort. And that's where most people fall back asleep, because the truth of awakening is that it costs you your illusions, and sometimes those illusions are all you've ever known. But if you press through, if you keep breathing into the discomfort, keep trusting the subtle signals, keep showing up for your inner practice, then the Merkaba begins to anchor. It becomes stable, like a gyroscope inside your being, holding you steady as the rest of the world spins in chaos. It doesn't remove the chaos, it changes how you experience it. You become unmoved, not because you're numb, but because you're tuned to a higher octave of awareness. This is what the ancients knew. This is why initiation was necessary, not because you needed permission, but because you needed preparation. Not everyone is ready to hold that much power without distortion. The Merkaba isn't a toy, it's a force, and it requires integrity, clarity, and alignment to function at its full potential. That's the path you're on now, the path of remembering, of refining, of reactivating the light body vehicle that was never truly gone, just waiting for you to step in and start driving. The Merkaba was never meant to serve just one person. While it begins within you, it was designed for something far bigger, collective ascension. And that's the part no one talks about. In a world obsessed with personal development, solo success, and individual enlightenment, we've lost the blueprint for communal evolution. But the Merkaba doesn't just lift the self, it lifts the whole. When activated, your field doesn't just transform your own experience. It begins to ripple outward, altering the frequency of everything around you. You become a transmitter, a walking vortex, a reminder to others of what they've forgotten. And that's where the real power is, not just in accessing higher dimensions, but in anchoring them into this one. This is why true awakening makes people uncomfortable, because once your Merkaba begins to spin, people feel it. Even if they don't understand it, they sense the difference. You become harder to manipulate. You're no longer hooked by shame. You stop reacting. You start radiating, and that energy threatens the status quo. You'll notice it in subtle ways, how certain people pull away, how others suddenly open up around you, how synchronicities follow you like a shadow. You'll notice that you're not just perceiving reality differently, you're bending it, not through force, but through coherence. That's what happens when your inner vehicle begins to spin. You stop chasing alignment and start generating it. And when enough people do this, when enough Merkabas light up across the collective field, it changes everything. It creates a harmonic web that cuts through distortion, disinformation, and division. It acts like a spiritual neural network, restoring memory to a species that has forgotten its origin. You begin to realize that awakening isn't about escaping the world. It's about transforming it from within. You don't rise up to leave, you rise up to illuminate. The Merkaba is how you do it. Not by shouting louder or debating better, but by becoming the frequency that others had forgotten they could reach. This is what ancient communities understood, and what modern culture has lost. In ancient times, initiation didn't just elevate the individual, it was done to elevate the tribe, the temple, the nation. The more you awakened, the more you were called to serve. And serve didn't mean sacrifice. It meant radiate. It meant carry the codes, hold the frequency, walk as a bridge between the worlds. That's what the Merkaba makes you, a bridge between the 3D and 5D, between density and light, between the old way and what's coming next. But here's the part that takes courage. Once you start walking as that bridge, you can't unsee. You can't go back. You'll see how much of the world is built to keep people asleep, how the media distorts, how institutions manipulate, how fear is fed like oxygen into every system. You'll see how most of what passes as normal is actually a frequency trap designed to keep your Merkaba dormant. And you'll feel the pull to speak out, to share, to guide, not because you think you're better, but because you finally remember who you are. And more importantly, you remember who everyone else is too. That's when compassion becomes unavoidable. Not pity, compassion. The knowing that even those deep in darkness are still carrying a dormant vehicle of light. That even those who resist the truth the hardest are just afraid of what remembering might cost them. And you understand, because you were there once. That's why your presence matters. Because in a world full of noise, your coherence becomes a signal, a lighthouse. You stop pushing people to wake up, and instead you become a field that makes forgetting harder. That's real leadership. That's real guidance. Not control, not superiority, but radiant alignment that reminds others of what's possible. This is where the Merkaba becomes more than personal. It becomes planetary. Every field you activate contributes to the awakening grid. Every time you align, you clear distortion for someone else to step in. You become part of a new architecture, one not built on fear, but on frequency. One that doesn't control through scarcity, but liberates through remembrance. There's a point in every awakening where the internal shifts demand external action. You begin to realize that it's not enough to know the truth. You have to live it. The Merkaba wasn't activated to sit silently within you. It's a vehicle, and vehicles are meant to move. But move toward what? That's the question most people never get to. They feel the energy shift, they glimpse the synchronicities, they awaken to hidden truths, but they don't take the next step. And that's where the system hopes you'll stop. Because as long as your awakening stays internal, it's manageable. It's only when you begin to reorganize your life around that truth, when you begin to break your patterns, say no to the scripts, and step out of the roles, that your light body becomes a force the system can't ignore. And this is where your environment starts to feel friction. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something real. You start questioning the purpose of your work, the intention behind your relationships, the meaning behind your habits. You start to notice how much of your life was built to contain you, not support you. And suddenly, the cost of staying asleep becomes unbearable. That's the beginning of true sovereignty. It doesn't start with rebellion. It starts with responsibility. You realize that your energy is not just yours to feel, but to manage, direct, and guard. You become intentional with your focus, ruthless with your boundaries, and sacred with your time. Not because you're trying to be better, but because your Merkaba won't function in a life built on chaos. This is where people often feel alone, because awakening doesn't always come with community at first. It often begins with disconnection, the kind that strips away what's false so you can finally see what's true. But here's the thing, that space isn't emptiness, it's a possibility. It's the open field where your new life begins to take form. And it's where your Merkaba starts to lead, not metaphorically, but energetically. You'll notice yourself being drawn to new places, new people, new ideas, not through force, but through resonance. That's your navigation system coming online. That's your higher self using your light body to guide you into alignment. You're not chasing purpose anymore, you're embodying it. And as you do, you become harder to deceive. You stop looking to media, culture, and broken systems to define your worth or direct your path. You start observing, not absorbing. You start feeling truth in your body before it even reaches your mind. And in that clarity, you realize something profound. The system wasn't just controlling your reality, it was feeding off your participation. Every time you invested your energy into a narrative that diminished you, you were fueling a structure that depended on your forgetfulness. But the moment you pull your energy back, reclaim your frequency, reframe your values, rebuild your habits, you begin dismantling that structure from the inside out. This is where your Merkaba becomes a tool of revolution. Because now, it's not just about personal peace, it's about energetic disruption. You start voting with your vibration. You pull your attention from the media that manipulates. You redirect your money toward creations that align with your truth. You build habits that nourish your body as a vessel, not a burden. You create, share, and speak from a place of coherence, and that coherence spreads quietly, relentlessly, until it becomes a current no system can contain. You were never meant to do this alone. Because while the Merkaba begins within the self, it reaches its highest potential in unity. When we activate together, we create not just awakening, but acceleration. And the more we align, the faster we rise, not above the world, but within it, lighting it from the inside out. This is the part of the journey where something fundamental shifts, not just in your understanding, but in your identity. Up until now, you may have seen the Merkaba as a tool, a system, or a vehicle to be accessed. But the truth is deeper than that. The Merkaba isn't something you use, it's something you are. It's not external. It's encoded. Your very consciousness is the technology. Your field is the interface. Your breath is the ignition. And once you embody that, once you stop chasing activation and start living as the activated, the illusion of separation collapses. You stop looking for signs from the universe and start realizing you are the sign. You are the signal that this world has been waiting for. This is why reclaiming your Merkaba is so threatening to the system, because people who live from this space can't be managed. They don't bend to fear. They don't chase approval. They don't worship authority because they know they carry the divine blueprint within. They're not better. They're just awake. And awakening doesn't come with a halo or a badge. It comes with responsibility. To live deliberately, to act with precision, to speak with clarity, to move through the world not as someone looking to escape it, but as someone determined to rewire it from the inside out. That's the legacy of the Merkaba. It's not just for mystics in caves. It's for the artist, the healer, the rebel, the visionary. It's for you. And maybe that's the hardest part to accept, that all of this was already within you, that the sacred geometry others studied in books is spinning in your field right now, that the chariot of light described in ancient texts isn't a relic, it's your birthright. And the moment you truly believe that, everything changes. You stop waiting. You stop doubting. You stop outsourcing your power to systems that were never built for your evolution. You start listening, not to the noise, but to the quiet intelligence beneath it. You start trusting the subtle pull that leads you to new spaces, new choices, new timelines. And slowly, you begin living from the future, not the past. Because the Merkaba doesn't move through linear time, it moves through resonance. The more aligned you are, the faster it spins. The faster it spins, the more access you have to guidance, to insight, to multidimensional awareness. This is how the veil lifts, not all at once, but layer by layer, every time you choose truth over comfort, coherence over conformity, presence over performance. And that's not always easy, but it is always worth it. Because every time you embody this path, you're not just transforming your life, you're changing the collective field. You become a stabilizer, a conductor, a reminder that we are not bound by what we've been taught. We are not limited to the five senses, the material plane, or the identities we were given. You are not here to merely survive the system. You are here to outgrow it, to outshine it, to create something far more luminous in its place. A world not built on hierarchy, control, or scarcity, but on frequency, harmony, and light. A world shaped by people who remember, people like you. And yes, it will challenge everything you've known. Yes, it will stretch your perception. But if you've made it this far, you already know you didn't come here to play small. You came here to awaken, and the Merkaba is how you do it. So don't stop here. Don't let this just be another powerful idea you carry without embodying. Make the shift. Walk the talk. And if you're ready to dive deeper, we created Insights Academy for people like you, truth seekers, who want the knowledge that doesn't make it to the surface. Sign up using the link in the description and get a free digital copy of the Kybalion, the hermetic key that ties this all together. Only available for a limited time. Because the next step isn't something you watch, it's something you become. And the only thing standing between you and that future is permission. Your own. You don't need to earn it. Just step in. The Merkaba is already waiting. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting. I understood it.